Get out of first class. Now!
He snapped his fingers toward the back of the boarding line as if shooing a dog.
Sir, my ticket says...
I said get out! Are you deaf or stupid?
Look at my ticket.
She tried to show him. He snatched it, looked at it, looked at her, then laughed. A vulgar laugh that echoed across the gate.
First class, of course. Little girl. And I'm the Pope.
He tore it in half, slowly, staring into her eyes.
You're disgusting. Go back where you belong.
She didn't move, didn't raise her voice. Are you finished? Security! Get this trash out of my gate. But the man had no idea whose ticket he'd just torn, and by the time he realized it, it was too late. 6 hours earlier, the morning was quiet. Victoria Shaw stood in her kitchen at 5:15 a.m. Coffee dripped slow and steady into a porcelain mug. The smell of dark roast filled the room. No sugar, no cream. Black. The way she'd been drinking it for 28 years in the United States Air Force. Her townhouse near Stone Mountain, Georgia, was small but precise. Every surface clean. Every book aligned on its shelf. The bed made with corners so tight you could bounce a quarter off the sheets. Old habits don't retire, even when you do. She walked down the hallway, coffee in hand. The walls told her story without saying a word. A framed photo of her standing beside an F-16 on a desert runway. A commendation letter signed by a 4-star general. A shadow box near the front door. Colonel Eagles pinned on black velvet. A wing commander patch from Holloman Air Force Base stitched underneath. 28 years, 14 deployments, over 3,000 personnel under her command. But today, none of that was visible. Victoria wore a tailored navy blazer, simple gold earrings and comfortable flats. No uniform, no rank insignia, no military ID hanging from her neck. She looked like any professional black woman on her way to catch a morning flight. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Good luck on the speech today, Mom. You're going to crush it. Love you. Victoria smiled. Her daughter always knew when to text. She was heading to Washington, D.C., a keynote address at a Department of Defense procurement summit. Inside her leather briefcase sat a printed copy of her speech, a flash drive with classified-level clearance documentation, and a letter on DoD letterhead addressed to Colonel Victoria Shaw. She grabbed her bag, locked the door, and headed for the airport. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International, the busiest airport on the planet. By 7 a.m., the terminal was already a zoo. Rolling suitcases clattered across tile floors. Announcements echoed from every direction. The smell of fast food breakfast mixed with jet fuel drifting from the gates. Victoria moved through TSA pre-check with practiced efficiency. Shoes on, laptop stays in the bag. No fuss, no small talk, no wasted motion. In front of her, an elderly man struggled to lift his carry-on onto the conveyor belt. His arms shook under the weight of it. Nobody in line moved to help him. Victoria reached over and set it on the belt for him. "Thank you so much, young lady," he said with a grateful nod. "Yes, sir," she replied, a reflex. Military courtesy that never leaves you, no matter how many years pass since you hung up the uniform. She made her way to Gate B-22. Skylink Airlines Flight 1184 to Reagan National. Her seat? First class, 2A. Purchased with her own money. Confirmed. Assigned. Paid in full. She found a chair near the window and sat down. Outside on the tarmac, planes taxied slowly through the early morning haze. Soft golden light was just beginning to break through a thin layer of clouds hanging low over the runway. Peace. That's what this moment was. Just peace. Then she noticed him. Behind the gate counter, a man paced back and forth like a caged animal, barking orders at the young gate agent working the podium. Bradley Turner, regional station manager for Skylink Airlines. Mid-40s, broad shoulders, permanent scowl carved into his face. He oversaw gates B-18 through B-30 and ran them like his own personal kingdom. The gate agent, a younger guy named Derek Cole, flinched every time Bradley opened his mouth. "Speed it up, Derek. I don't want a single delay on my board today. Not one." "Yes, sir." "And stand up straight. You look like you're half asleep." Bradley turned away from Derek and scanned the boarding area. His eyes moved slowly from passenger to passenger. They slid right past the white businessman in row 3 reading the Wall Street Journal, past the white couple with matching carry-ons whispering to each other, past the white family with a toddler chewing on a stuffed giraffe. They stopped on Victoria. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked away, then looked right back. Something dark shifted behind his eyes. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped the counter. Victoria didn't notice him. She was reading the text from her daughter one more time, still smiling softly to herself. She had no idea that the man behind that counter had already decided she didn't belong here. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers at gate B-22. Skylink Airlines Flight 1184 to Reagan National, now boarding first class and priority passengers. Victoria stood, smoothed her blazer, and picked up her briefcase. She walked toward the priority boarding lane with her boarding pass in one hand and her ID in the other. Calm, unhurried. The way she'd walked into 1,000 briefing rooms before. Derek Cole stood at the podium. He took her boarding pass, scanned it. The machine beeped green. Valid. Confirmed. First class, seat 2A. Derek nodded. "You're all set, ma'am. Welcome aboard." Victoria took a step forward. A hand shot out in front of her chest. "Hold on." Bradley Turner stepped between her and the jetway. He didn't look at Derek. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at Victoria. Up and down, slowly, the way someone inspects something they've already decided to throw away. "Let me see that." He snatched the boarding pass from Derek's hand. Not from Victoria, from his own employee, like she wasn't even part of the transaction. He held it up, squinted at it, turned it over. "This says first class." Victoria nodded. "Yes, it does. First class." He repeated it louder, making sure the passengers behind her could hear. "You, in first class." "That's correct." Bradley tilted his head. A slow, ugly smile crept across his face. "And who exactly paid for this?" "I did." "You did." He let out a short laugh through his nose. "With what? A stolen credit card?" The line behind Victoria went quiet. A woman gasped softly. A man lowered his newspaper. Victoria kept her voice level. "I paid with my own card. My booking confirmation is on my phone. I'm also a Skylink Platinum member. Would you like to see my loyalty number?" She held out her phone. The confirmation was right there on the screen. Name, flight number, seat assignment, payment method, everything. Bradley didn't take the phone. He didn't even glance at it. "Put that away. I don't need your little phone tricks." Phone tricks? You heard me. I've seen this 100 times. People like you buy a refundable ticket, screenshot the confirmation, then cancel it and show up hoping nobody checks. That's not what happened. Sure it isn't. He turned to Derek. Pull up her record. Derek typed quickly, his fingers shaking over the keyboard. The screen confirmed everything. Paid in full. Seat assigned. Platinum status. No flags. No alerts. Nothing. Derek cleared his throat. Sir, her booking is valid. Everything checks out. Bradley didn't even turn around. Run it again. Sir, I said run it again. Derek ran it again. Same result. Green across the board. Sir, it's confirmed. She's clear to... Did I ask for your opinion? Derek went quiet. His hands hovered over the keyboard. He stared at the screen like he was hoping it would tell him what to do. Bradley turned back to Victoria. He leaned in close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath and see the vein pulsing at his temple. Where'd you really get this ticket? Victoria's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed steady. I purchased it 3 weeks ago through the Skylink app. My confirmation number is SKL-8841-VCS. You can verify it right now. I've given you my ID, my phone, and my loyalty number. That is more than enough. No, it's not enough. Not for me. He looked her up and down again. Not even close. He held the boarding pass between 2 fingers, raised it to eye level so everyone in line could see what was about to happen. Then he tore it in half. Slowly, deliberately, staring into her eyes the entire time. The ripping sound cut through the silence like a blade. The 2 halves fluttered to the floor. There. Problem solved. Victoria looked down at the torn paper, then back up at him. You just destroyed my valid boarding pass. I just removed a fraudulent passenger from my gate. There's a difference. There's no fraud here, and you know it. Oh, I know exactly what I see. He raised his voice so the whole gate area could hear. I see someone who doesn't belong in first class trying to scam her way onto my plane, and I'm not having it. Not today. Not on my watch. He straightened up and jabbed his finger toward the terminal hallway. Economy is that way, but honestly, you probably can't even afford that. Maybe try the Greyhound station downtown. That's more your speed, sweetheart. A murmur rippled through the boarding line. Phones were out everywhere now. Screens were glowing. At least 6 people were recording. A white businessman 3 spots back in line shifted his weight uncomfortably, but said nothing. A young couple looked at each other, then stared down at their shoes. Nadine Prescott, a black woman in her late 30s, a nurse, traveling with her elderly mother, stepped forward from the line. Her phone was already in her hand. Recording. Excuse me, you can't treat her like that. She showed you everything you asked for. Her ticket was valid. Bradley's head snapped toward Nadine like a dog hearing a whistle. Mind your business. This is my business. I'm standing right here watching you humiliate this woman for no reason. One more word and you're off this flight too. You and Grandma. I don't care. I'll empty this whole line if I have to. Nadine's mother clutched her daughter's arm with trembling fingers. Baby, don't. Please. Not here. Nadine stepped back. Her jaw was shaking. But she didn't put her phone down. The red recording light stayed on. Bradley pulled his radio from his belt and pressed the button with his thumb. Security to gate B22. I've got a non-compliant passenger refusing verification, possible fraudulent ticket. She's becoming aggressive and causing a disturbance. I need her removed from the gate area immediately." Victoria hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't moved from where she stood. She hadn't so much as pointed a finger. Aggressive. That word hung in the air like a bruise. 2 airport security officers arrived within 3 minutes. A tall man with a shaved head and a shorter woman with a tight ponytail. Both wore dark uniforms. Both had their hands resting near their belts. Their boots squeaked on the polished tile as they walked up to the gate. "Ma'am, can you step aside and come with us, please?" the tall one said. Victoria looked at him calmly. "May I ask what I'm being detained for?" Bradley jumped in before security could answer. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Victoria and the officers like he was briefing his own team. She attempted to board with a fraudulent first-class ticket. When I confronted her, she became hostile, raised her voice, refused to cooperate with standard verification. I had to confiscate and void the ticket for security purposes. It's all documented. Every single word was a lie, and every single person standing in that boarding line knew it. But nobody said a word. Not one. Victoria turned to the officers directly. Her voice was calm, measured, and clear. "My name is Victoria Shaw. I held a valid, paid, first-class ticket for this flight. This man took it from the gate agent's hand and tore it in half in front of dozens of witnesses. I provided my government ID, my booking confirmation, and my Skylink Platinum loyalty number. I have not raised my voice. I have not been hostile. I have not refused anything. Everything he just told you is false." The officers exchanged a glance. The shorter one looked at Bradley, then back at Victoria. Bradley crossed his arms. "She's lying. I flagged her ticket in the system 20 minutes ago. Check it yourself." Derek Cole stood frozen behind the counter. His face was pale. His fingers gripped the edge of the podium so hard, his knuckles had gone white. He knew what he'd seen. He knew what the system showed. He knew every word out of Bradley's mouth was a fabrication. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He said nothing. The tall officer gestured down the hall toward a gray door marked Security Screening. "Ma'am, we're going to ask you to come with us. Just standard procedure. We'll get this sorted out." Victoria picked up her briefcase from the floor where she'd set it down. She straightened the collar of her blazer. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She walked between the 2 officers with the same posture she'd carried through 28 years of military service, through desert runways and Pentagon corridors and combat briefing rooms where generals waited for her word. Back straight, chin up, eyes forward. Behind her, Bradley Turner leaned against the gate counter and folded his arms across his chest. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. He watched her disappear around the corner. He thought he'd won. The screening room smelled like recycled air and floor cleaner. A single fluorescent tube buzzed overhead, casting a flat, cold light across the small gray space. 2 metal chairs, 1 metal table, a camera in the ceiling corner with a red dot blinking slowly. Victoria sat with her briefcase on the table. Her hands were folded. Her back was straight. She hadn't said a word since they brought her in. The 2 security officers stood near the door. The tall one leaned against the wall. The shorter one checked her radio. Neither had told Victoria what would happen next. She asked once, "Am I being detained?" No clear answer. She asked again. "I'd like to speak with a supervisor, please." The tall officer shifted his weight. "Someone's coming, ma'am. Just sit tight." "I have a right to know why I'm being held." "Ma'am, Sit tight. 5 long minutes passed. Then 10. The fluorescent light flickered and steadied. Through the walls, she could hear muffled boarding announcements. Her flight was still at the gate. Her seat was still empty. And she was locked in this gray box with no explanation, no phone call, and no timeline. Then the door opened. Bradley Turner walked in like he owned the room. He didn't knock. He just strolled past the officers, pulled the empty chair from under the table, flipped it around, and sat down across from Victoria with his arms draped over the backrest. He smiled. "So, here we are." Victoria didn't respond. "You know, I've been doing this job for 9 years. 9 years at this airport. And I've gotten very, very good at spotting people who don't belong." He leaned forward. "The ones who fake it always have this look, like they practiced being calm in the mirror before they showed up." Victoria met his eyes, but said nothing. "That's you, a fraud in a nice blazer pretending she's something she's not." He pointed at her briefcase. "Open it." "No." "Excuse me?" "That briefcase contains materials related to a federal defense consultation. You have no authority to search it." Bradley laughed, a full, open-mouthed laugh that bounced off the walls. "Federal defense consultation." He looked at the officers. "You hearing this? Stolen ticket to federal defense in 30 seconds. New record." Neither officer laughed. Neither stopped him. He turned back. "Here's what happens next. You open that briefcase. I look inside. When I find nothing but makeup and snacks, we end this little performance." Victoria didn't move. "Or I call TSA. No-fly list. Federal investigation. Your name in a database for life. All because you couldn't admit you don't belong in first class." Victoria's voice was firm. "I am not opening that briefcase. Its contents are protected under federal consulting agreements. Contact Skylink Corporate or the TSA security director if you want to escalate. I will cooperate with either, but I will not comply with an unauthorized search by a station manager with no jurisdiction over my belongings." Big words for someone sitting in a security room. Then he stood up, reached across the table, and grabbed the briefcase. "Don't touch that." He yanked it toward him, fumbled with the brass latches. One popped open, then the other. Victoria rose. "You do not have the right to—" "Sit down." "That contains classified level—" "I said sit down." The tall officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, please take your seat." Victoria looked at the officer. The officer looked at the floor. She sat down slowly. Her fingers gripped the edge of the metal chair. Not from fear, from restraint. Bradley flipped the briefcase open and rifled through it with both hands, carelessly, roughly, like a man tearing apart a junk drawer. Papers crumpled under his fingers, a printed sheet ripped at the corner, a folder bent in half. He wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for satisfaction. He pulled out a printed document, scanned it. Department of Defense Procurement Summit. He showed it to the officers like a punchline, tossed it back. Cute. He pulled out a flash drive, held it up to the light, set it down like it meant nothing. He found a leather folder with printed notes, flipped through pages, reading fragments aloud in a mocking sing-song. Strategic Defense Procurement Outlook. Coalition Interoperability Framework. He tossed the folder aside. You spent all night on Google putting this kit together. Then he found the letter. Heavy cream paper. Official DOD letterhead. Embossed seal at the top. Addressed to Colonel Victoria Shaw, United States Air Force, retired. He read it slowly, then snorted. Colonel. He held it up for the officers. She says she's a colonel now. His face dripped with contempt. Printed this at home? Spent a whole afternoon on the seal? He dropped it on the table. Sweetheart, I've seen better fakes from teenagers at the DMV. Colonel. And I'm a 5-star general. Victoria didn't blink. That document is authentic. What you just did, opening my briefcase, handling federal materials, is a serious offense. His grin widened. What are you going to do? Call your congressman? He leaned in until his face was a foot from hers. Nobody's coming to save you. Not in this room. Not ever. Victoria held his stare until he was the one who looked away. He straightened up. Something about her stillness unsettled him, but he buried it quick. He paced, slow laps around the room, shoes clicking. You know what I think? You work at some little office, answer phones, something forgettable. And one day you overheard someone talking about first class. Thought, why not me? He stopped. So you saved up, bought a pretty ticket, put on your blazer, did your hair, walked in thinking today was your Cinderella moment. He crouched beside her chair, eyes level with hers, voice low. But here's the thing about Cinderella. The clock always strikes midnight, and you go right back to where you came from. Victoria's fingers pressed hard into her knuckles under the table. Her pulse hammered in her wrists, but her face was a mask. 28 years of military discipline built that mask, and no man in a cheap tie was going to crack it. Are you finished? Not even close. He picked the letter up, held it between two fingers, the same way he'd held her boarding pass at the gate. You know what I should do with this? Same thing I did with your ticket. He made a slow tearing motion, stopped just short. He wanted her to flinch, wanted her to beg. Nothing broke. He tossed it back in disgust. You're good. The posture, the voice, the stare. But it doesn't change what you are. You don't belong in first class. You don't belong in that blazer. You sure as hell don't belong near a colonel's rank. You belong in the back. You've always belonged in the back. The room went silent. The tube buzzed. The camera blinked. Victoria looked at him with eyes that had stared down generals, given launch orders over combat radios, held steady in rooms where the wrong word meant people died. She said nothing. Not yet. Bradley walked to the door. Hold her until flight 1184 departs. Every passenger boards first. Then escort her out. I don't want her near my gates again. He paused in the doorway. And if she tries anything, call real police. The door clicked shut. Victoria sat alone in the buzzing silence. The letter sat crooked on the table. The flash drive lay on its side. Her speech, 3 weeks of careful work for the most important keynote of her career, was crumpled at the bottom of the briefcase. Through the thin walls, she heard the final boarding call for flight 1184. Her flight, her seat, departing without her. She closed her eyes, took one slow breath, let it out through her nose, and waited. Because Victoria Shaw had learned something across 28 years of service that a man like Bradley Turner would never understand. The people who talk the loudest always fall the hardest. And the fall was about to begin. Outside the screening room, The gate area was anything but quiet. Nadine Prescott had been standing near the door the entire time. Through the narrow window, her phone captured everything. Bradley rifling through the briefcase, holding up the letter, laughing, crouching beside Victoria with that ugly grin spread across his face. Shaky footage, but clear enough to end a career. She posted it. No caption, just 45 raw seconds of a man tearing a woman apart in a room where she couldn't fight back. Within minutes, it had 50,000 views. The comments exploded. People tagged Skylink Airlines, tagged local news stations, tagged the NAACP, and every veterans organization they could find. The hashtag wrote itself. Hashtag Skylink Shame. And it climbed fast. At the gate counter, Derek Cole stared at his phone beneath the podium. His hands trembled. He typed a text to his girlfriend with shaking thumbs. My manager just destroyed a black woman at the gate, tore her ticket, searched her briefcase. She had military documents, letters addressed to a colonel. I think she's real. And I stood there like a coward. I didn't say a word. He stared at it before he hit send. 3 dots appeared. Then the reply. Then say something now, Derek, before it's too late. He locked his phone, slid it under the counter. His hands were still shaking. It started with a voice in the hallway. What the hell is going on at this gate? Colonel James Whitfield, retired, silver-haired, 63 years old, was walking toward Gate B-24 when he saw the crowd. Passengers huddled in clusters, phones out, whispering. A woman near the window was crying. 2 security officers stood outside a closed door marked security screening. Whitfield had spent 31 years in the United States Air Force. He knew what a situation looked like. And this was one. He stopped. A young woman, Nadine Prescott, stood near the screening room door with her phone still recording. Excuse me, ma'am, what happened here? Nadine saw the Veterans of Foreign Wars cap on his head, saw the steadiness in his posture, and she told him everything. The black woman in first class, the manager who tore her ticket, the security call, the briefcase, the letter addressed to a colonel. Whitfield's face changed. What was her name? Shaw, Victoria Shaw. The color drained from his face. Then it came roaring back, red, hot, furious. Where is she? Nadine pointed at the screening room door. Whitfield didn't walk. He moved, with the kind of authority that makes people step aside without being asked. He pushed past the 2 security officers and put his hand flat on the door handle. The shorter officer blocked him. Sir, this is a restricted area. Whitfield turned slowly and looked at her with 31 years of command behind his eyes. My name is Colonel James Whitfield, United States Air Force, retired. I was the deputy wing commander at Holloman Air Force Base under the woman you're holding in that room. Open this door. Now. The officer hesitated, looked at her partner. He nodded. The door opened. Victoria was sitting exactly where they'd left her, back straight, hands folded, eyes closed. The crumpled documents spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. She opened her eyes. Vic. For the first time in over an hour, something shifted behind Victoria's mask. Not a crack, just a flicker. The smallest recognition of someone she trusted in a room full of people who had failed her. James. Whitfield stepped in. His voice was low, but his hands were shaking. What did they do to you? The station manager tore my boarding pass, called security, and searched my briefcase without authorization. He said my ticket was fraudulent. It wasn't. Whitfield looked at the table, saw the DOD letter crumpled and stained with a thumbprint, saw the flash drive tossed carelessly on its side, saw the speech, 3 weeks of work, crushed at the bottom of the briefcase. He picked up the letter, read it, set it down gently, the way you handle something that matters. Then he walked out of the screening room. The door stayed open behind him. He found Bradley Turner standing at the gate counter, checking his watch like a man waiting for a bus. "Are you the station manager?" Bradley looked up, saw a silver-haired man in a VFW cap, rolled his eyes. "Sir, this is a staff area. Passengers need to—" "I asked you a question. Are you the one who detained that woman?" "I handled a security issue. It's resolved." "Resolved." Whitfield stepped closer, close enough that Bradley had to tilt his head back. "Son, I was the deputy wing commander at Holloman Air Force Base. The woman you just humiliated, searched, and locked in a room, Colonel Victoria Shaw, was my commanding officer. She ran the entire wing, 3,000 personnel. Every aircraft on that base answered to her." The blood drained from Bradley's face. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You called her a fraud. You tore her ticket. You searched a briefcase full of classified defense materials. And you did every bit of it because she's black." I didn't. I was just following." "You weren't following anything." At that moment, a woman in a pilot's uniform appeared from the jetway. Captain Elaine Drummond, pilot of Flight 1184, had heard the commotion on the crew channel. She saw Victoria stepping out of the screening room and stopped mid-stride. "Colonel Shaw?" Victoria looked at her. Drummond straightened instinctively, shoulders back, chin up, a posture drilled into her during her years as a junior pilot at Holloman. "Ma'am, I served under your command in 2015. It's an honor." She turned to Bradley. Her voice went cold. "What exactly happened here?" Bradley stammered. His hands trembled. His eyes darted from Whitfield to Drummond to the officers to the passengers to the phones still recording from every angle. Victoria stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. When she spoke, every single person within 30 feet went silent. "My name is Colonel Victoria Shaw, United States Air Force, retired. I served 28 years. I commanded the wing that trained the pilots who protect this country. You tore my ticket. You searched my briefcase without authorization. You detained me without cause. And you did all of it because of what I look like." Bradley's mouth moved. "Colonel, if I'd known who you were—" Victoria cut him off. One sentence, the only one that mattered. "That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me like a human being." The gate area went dead silent. Bradley Turner had nothing left to say. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then everything collapsed. Bradley grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. The smirk was gone. The swagger was gone. What remained was a man watching his entire world crack open beneath his feet. "Colonel, Listen, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know who you were. If someone had just told me—" "Stop talking," Whitfield said. "I was doing my job. I was following standard protocol." "There is no protocol for what you did," Victoria said quietly. "And the fact that you keep saying, 'if I'd known,' tells me everything. You think this would have been acceptable if I were nobody? If I were just a woman with a ticket trying to board a plane?" Bradley opened his mouth, closed it, Nothing came out. Drummond pulled her crew radio and spoke clearly. "This is Captain Drummond, Flight 1184. I need the airport operations director at gate B22 immediately. We have a passenger rights situation involving a detained military officer." Within 8 minutes, the gate area had completely transformed. Airport police arrived first, 2 officers in dark uniforms. Then, the Hartsfield-Jackson operations director, a tall woman in a navy suit with a badge clipped to her lapel. She took one look at the crowd, the phones, the security officers by the screening room, and Bradley Turner gripping the counter like a life raft. "What happened here?" Whitfield briefed her in 60 seconds. Military precision. No wasted words. Drummond confirmed from the crew side. Nadine Prescott offered her phone. The video was cued and ready. The operations director watched all 45 seconds. Her jaw tightened visibly with every frame. She turned to the security officers. "Pull gate surveillance from the last 90 minutes. All cameras covering B22, the boarding lane, and the screening corridor. Everything preserved, nothing overwritten." Then she turned to Bradley. "Mr. Turner, your airport security badge, now." His hand went to the lanyard around his neck. Fingers fumbled with the clip. He unclipped it slowly and held it out like a man surrendering the last thing he had. She took it without a word. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You are not to return to any Skylink gate or restricted zone in this airport. Airport police will escort you to the employee exit. Do not speak to passengers. Do not speak to staff. Do not stop walking until you are outside this building." Bradley looked at the officers flanking him, looked at the passengers watching in silence, looked at the phones still aimed at his face. "This is a misunderstanding," he whispered. "I was just doing my job." Nobody responded, not one person. The officers walked him down the corridor. His footsteps echoed against the tile, the same floor Victoria had walked an hour earlier. She had walked with her head high. Bradley walked with his head down, shoulders caved, a man shrinking with every step until he rounded the corner and was gone. The operations director turned to Victoria. "Colonel Shaw, on behalf of Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International, I sincerely apologize for what you experienced today. There is no excuse." Skylink's corporate office in Dallas had already been alerted. The viral video reached them before the operations director even arrived at the gate. A regional vice president was on the line. Victoria would be rebooked on the next first-class flight to Reagan National, departing in 75 minutes. Full accommodation, personal escort, no questions. Victoria nodded. "Thank you." Before she left the gate area, a quiet voice stopped her. "Ma'am?" It was Derek Cole. The gate agent had stepped out from behind the counter for the first time all morning. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have spoken up. I saw everything. I knew your ticket was valid. I knew he was wrong. And I didn't say a word." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "You saw it. You knew it. And you said nothing." Derek's eyes dropped to the floor. "If you mean that apology," Victoria said, "put it on the record. Write a formal statement. Every detail, every word he said, everything you saw on that screen. Because if you don't, this happens again, to someone who doesn't have a Whitfield walking by." Derek nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I will." Victoria picked up her briefcase, straightened her blazer, and walked toward the VIP lounge with the same posture she'd carried through her entire career. Back straight, chin up, eyes forward. The video hit 5 million views before Victoria's rebooked flight even landed at Reagan National. By the time her wheels touched the tarmac in Washington, D.C., Nadine Prescott's 45-second clip had been picked up by CNN, MSNBC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Military Times. Every major news outlet in the country was running the same footage. A man in an airline uniform laughing at a letter addressed to a United States Air Force colonel, crouching beside a black woman in a screening room, tearing her boarding pass in half at a crowded gate. The hashtag Skylink shame held the #1 trending spot on every platform for 3 consecutive days. The comments section became a flood of outrage, personal stories, and demands for accountability. People were tagging civil rights organizations, veterans groups, and elected officials by the thousands. Then, Teresa Bowman got involved. Bowman was an investigative journalist based in Atlanta, sharp, relentless, and known for the kind of deep-dive reporting that made corporate legal departments lose sleep. She'd covered airline discrimination cases before, but this one had something the others didn't: a paper trail. Her team pulled internal Skylink records through a trusted source inside the company. What they found was devastating. Bradley Turner had been the subject of at least 12 formal complaints over the past 3 years, all involving black passengers at his gates. 11 of the 12 described the exact same pattern: a random ticket verification targeting a person of color, followed by confrontation, public humiliation, and in several cases, removal from the boarding area. Every single complaint had been filed through Skylink's internal reporting system. Every single one had been marked under review by regional management. Not one had resulted in disciplinary action. Not one had even received a formal written response. Bowman's segment aired on a Wednesday evening. It ran 18 minutes. She named Bradley Turner. She named the regional vice president who had buried the complaints for 3 years. She showed the internal emails, redacted but unmistakable, where managers dismissed passenger grievances with phrases like "no actionable pattern identified" and "consistent with standard verification procedures." The segment ended with a single question displayed on screen. How many times does a pattern have to repeat before someone calls it what it is? 36 hours later, Skylink Airlines CEO Reginald Ford held a press conference at the company's headquarters in Dallas. He stood behind a podium with no notes. His voice was steady, but heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. What happened to Colonel Victoria Shaw at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was inexcusable. It was not a policy failure. It was not a misunderstanding. It was discrimination, carried out by a Skylink employee, enabled by a management structure that failed to act on repeated warnings. He announced 5 immediate actions. First, Bradley Turner was terminated, effective immediately. Not suspended, not reassigned, terminated. Second, the regional vice president, who had ignored 12 complaints over 3 years, was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Third, Skylink would implement mandatory anti-discrimination training at every station across its network. Not a one-time seminar, but a recurring quarterly program with accountability measures and third-party oversight. Fourth, an independent review board, staffed by outside civil rights attorneys, not Skylink employees, would audit every passenger interaction complaint filed in the past 5 years. Fifth, a formal public apology to Colonel Victoria Shaw, delivered on camera with no qualifications and no corporate hedging. She earned her seat on that plane the same way she earned everything else in her life, with discipline, service, and dignity. We failed her. That ends today. The press conference was watched by 11 million people, but the consequences didn't stop at corporate. The Department of Justice opened a formal civil rights investigation into Bradley Turner's conduct. Federal prosecutors examined whether his documented pattern of targeting black passengers constituted a systematic violation of federal civil rights statutes under Title VI. Bradley was charged with 2 federal offenses: unlawful interference with a passenger under 49 U.S.C. Section 46,504 and willful destruction of a valid travel document. His attorney attempted to negotiate a plea, arguing Bradley had no prior criminal record and acted within what he believed to be his professional authority. The judge wasn't buying it. Citing the viral evidence, the 12 prior complaints, the internal emails, and Derek Cole's 14-page sworn statement detailing everything he witnessed from behind the gate counter, the judge handed down the sentence: 18 months of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service served exclusively with veterans organizations, a $25,000 fine, and a permanent lifetime ban from employment in the aviation industry. Bradley Turner would never work in an airport again. The courtroom was dead silent when the gavel came down. Bradley sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked for a comment. He said nothing. He climbed into a car and drove away. From the cameras, from the microphones, from the career he had built on unchecked power and the quiet tolerance of everyone above him. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Victoria Shaw delivered her keynote address at the Department of Defense Procurement Summit. She had rewritten the opening on the flight up. The original draft sat crumpled in her briefcase, a relic of the morning she had planned. The new opening was unscripted, personal, raw. She stood at the podium before 400 defense officials, military leaders, and procurement executives. She adjusted the microphone, took a breath, and told them what happened. Not the version from the news, not the 45-second clip. The full story, from Gate B-22 to the screening room to the moment her flight departed without her. She talked about serving her country for 28 years and being told she didn't belong in first class. About the weight of staying calm when every instinct tells you to fight back. About the thousands of black service members who come home from deployments overseas and walk straight into the same walls. Not at enemy checkpoints, but at airport gates, traffic stops, and boardroom doors. When she finished, 400 people rose to their feet. The ovation lasted a full minute. Victoria stood at the podium, chin up, eyes steady. The same posture she'd held in that screening room. Except this time, the room was standing for her. The speech went viral on its own merit, quoted in op-eds, referenced in congressional hearings, played across networks for a full week. 3 major airlines announced internal reviews of their passenger interaction protocols within the month. A congressional subcommittee cited Victoria's case during a formal hearing on racial discrimination in commercial aviation. The system didn't change overnight. It never does. But it cracked. And through that crack, light got in. So where are they now? Victoria Shaw went back to work. She continued her defense consulting career, flying in and out of airports across the country, always first class, always with her head high, always with that leather briefcase in hand. But she didn't stop at going back to normal. Normal wasn't enough. 3 months after the incident, she established the Shaw Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting black veterans transitioning from military service to civilian life. Career placement, legal advocacy, mental health resources, job training, housing support. everything for the service members who gave everything to their country and came home to a world that didn't always see them for who they truly are. The foundation launched with a single office in Atlanta. Within a year, it had expanded to 4 cities. Victoria funded it with her own savings, her consulting income, and a wave of donations that poured in after her keynote went viral. She didn't ask for sympathy. She built something. 6 months after the incident, Skylink Airlines invited Victoria to serve on their newly created Independent Oversight Board. The same board CEO Reginald Ford announced at his press conference. Victoria accepted on one condition. The board would have real authority, not advisory power, real, binding authority to investigate complaints, mandate policy changes, and hold leadership accountable when they failed. Skylink agreed. They didn't have a choice. Victoria didn't just survive what happened at Gate B-22. She turned it into a foundation, a platform, and a permanent seat at the table where decisions get made. Not because she wanted revenge. So the next woman standing in that boarding line, the one without a Whitfield walking by, without a Drummond stepping off the jetway, wouldn't have to stand alone. Bradley Turner completed his community service. All 300 hours. He spent them at a VA hospital in rural Georgia, sorting supply closets and cleaning waiting rooms alongside the same kind of veterans he once dismissed. Whether he learned anything is anyone's guess. He didn't give interviews. He didn't apologize. He quietly moved to a small town outside Macon, took a warehouse job, and disappeared from public life. He wasn't redeemed. He wasn't forgiven. He was simply diminished. A man who once controlled 12 gates at the busiest airport in the world now scanned barcodes in a building with no windows. The aviation industry moved on without him. Nobody noticed he was gone, and nobody missed him. Derek Cole submitted his 14-page statement the day after the incident. Every word Bradley said, every command he gave, every time the system showed green and Bradley overrode it with his own judgment and his own bias. The statement became critical evidence in the federal case and a turning point in Derek's own life. He was promoted to gate supervisor at a different terminal 6 months later. His first act was establishing a peer accountability protocol, a system where any gate agent could flag a colleague's behavior without retaliation. He named it the Green Light Protocol, because a green light should mean go. For everyone. Nadine Prescott was recognized by 3 civil rights organizations for her bystander courage. She didn't consider herself brave, just a nurse traveling with her elderly mother who had her phone in her hand. But what she did, standing near that window, pressing record, refusing to look away when every instinct told her to mind her own business, changed everything. She began volunteering with a passenger rights advocacy group in Atlanta. She tells people the same exact thing at every event. Your phone is a witness. Use it. So let me just leave you with this. Authority without accountability is just power. And power used to humiliate is always fragile. Because the truth has a way of showing up. Sometimes it's a bystander's phone. Sometimes it's a colleague's conscience. Sometimes it's a retired colonel who happens to walk past the right gate at the right time. Justice doesn't always arrive on schedule, but in this story, it arrived. The real question is, what do we do to help it arrive faster? If you were standing in that boarding line, watching someone's ticket get torn in half for no reason, would you hit record? Would you speak up? Or would you look away? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story made you feel something, share it. Stories like this only work when people actually hear them. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Nah, you should never have to prove your worth just to be treated like a person. Respect isn't a reward for status. It's the minimum. Power without decency? That's just bullying with a better outfit.